Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Notable and New Nonfiction from Astra Books for Young Readers, Why We Love Nonfiction, and You Should Too. I'm Julia Smith, Senior Editor, Books for Youth at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation, title list, and the Edelweiss catalog were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble accessing these materials, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions and will pass along all other questions to today's panelists so that they can follow up with you after the webinar. Last but not least, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. We have a wonderful webinar for you today, so let's meet our panelists. Juliana Loletta is the publisher of the Kane Press imprint. Since 2003, Juliana has been acquiring books for Kane Press that translate what kids learn in the classroom to their real lives, showing that learning is an exciting, invigorating, and fun part of life. She is on the lookout for fiction titles that find creative ways to convey educational topics, and she also loves a fresh take on a nonfiction curriculum topic. Carolyn Yoder is the founding editor and editorial director of Calkins Creek. Carolyn's books offer young readers an exciting and accurate look into the past, filled with both bright and dark moments. Her aim is to make young readers understand the past so that they can better understand the present and prepare for the future. Calkins Creek picture books, chapter books, and novels combine original and extensive research with creative, energetic writing. Gail Jarrow is the author of nonfiction books and novels ages 8 to 18. Her books for young readers have earned the winner of the Excellence in Nonfiction Award from YALSA ALA, the Robert F. Seibert Honor Book Award, Orbis Pictus Honor, Children's Book Guild Nonfiction Award, the Jefferson Cup, Golden Kite Honor for Nonfiction for Older Readers, Eureka Gold Award, ALA Notable Book, Notable Social Studies Trade Book, Best Book Awards from the National Science Teachers Association, Kirkus Reviews, School Library Journal, Booklist, Bulletin for the Center of Children's Books, Bank Street College of Education, New York Public Library, and Chicago Public Library. She has received additional awards and recognition from the American Booksellers Association, American Library Association, Public Library Association, the Society of School Librarians International, and Junior Library Guild. And finally, Beth Anderson. Beth has always been fascinated with words and language, from sound and meaning to figurative language and point of view to cultural and scientific aspects of language. After teaching for 20 years, Beth started writing for children in 2013 and has found her niche with narrative nonfiction and historical fiction picture books. Her books include Lizzie Demands a Seat, winner of Bank Street College Education's Flora Stieglitz Strauss Award for Excellence in Nonfiction, among other accolades. Revolutionary Prudence Wright and Tad Lincoln's Restless Wriggle, and upcoming Cloaked in Courage. We will hear from Carolyn, Gail, and Beth later in the presentation, but first we'll kick things off with Juliana Loletta. Take it away, Juliana.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you for everyone who's joining us today. As Julia said, I'm Juliana Loletta. I'm the publisher of Kane Press and Calkins Creek, which are imprints of Astra books for young readers. Astra is a recently formed and very quickly growing publishing company, which we're excited to be part of, but these two imprints have been around for many years. So I'll start with Kane Press, and then, as Julia said, we'll turn it over to Calkins Creek. So Kane Press publishes fun educational books that engage, involve, and inspire kids ages 3 to 11. You can go to the next slide, please. And Kane Press was founded in 1992 by Joanne Kane, making this year our 30th anniversary, yay. Joanne is a former elementary school teacher, so she had oodles of firsthand knowledge about what keeps kids engaged in learning and what doesn't. And she teamed up with fellow teachers and librarians and authors to create stories that kids would be excited about, stories that contained curriculum connections so that educators could use them in the classroom as a jumping off point for STEM and literacy lessons, but stories that would be exciting and accessible and really interesting to kids. Stories that would give them a springboard of knowledge and not bore them with textbook jargon. So without further ado, then let's get into the really fun part, which is the books. Next slide, please. And we'll start with Eureka. Kane Press books have historically been series-based, and our newest series is Pure Nonfiction, a multicultural STEM meets history series called Eureka, the Biography of an Idea. Each Eureka book explores a groundbreaking invention from the very first aha moment of discovery, often thousands of years ago, to its continued evolution as inventors from all over the world made it better and better, up to the invention's current form, which people use today. And what I personally find inspiring about this series is that it shows kids that science and innovation never happen in a vacuum. Most inventions come from that initial eureka moment, followed by sometimes centuries of tinkering and tweaking and innovating. So we can always look at what we have and try to find ways to make it better. We launched this series to great acclaim with 4 titles, as you can see here: Bicycle, Camera, Glasses, and Light Bulb. 2 more to come soon. And 3 of the 4 titles were named NSTA CBC Best STEM Books of 2022. The 4th was a Junior Library Guild selection. So let me take you through a couple books. Next slide, please. We'll start with one of our best STEM books, the biography, if you will, of Glasses. About a third of kids and 2/3 of adults wear some kind of corrective eyewear. And this book gives a fascinating look into the evolution of glasses, starting with the moment someone first noticed that a jar of water magnified what was behind it. And that moment of inspiration, what if we could help people see better? Next slide, please. And although the structure of glasses seems pretty obvious to us now, as you can see from this spread, it was truly a global effort with innovators from many different countries trying to come up with a way to keep pieces of glass hovering in front of your eyeballs. My favorite is the lady with the loop over her head. You know, hat hair is bad enough without trying to imagine glasses hair. Next slide, please. So in addition to the cultural and historical aspects of these innovations, this is at heart a STEM series, with each book detailing the scientific process of how an invention is made and how it works. Next book. And the invention of the light bulb is one of my favorite STEM stories because it shows us that science is the process of failure and trying again. Next slide. So in this light bulb biography, you will see that the key to making a light bulb that wouldn't burn out or burn down your house was cracking the code of the filament. Thomas Edison and his fellow inventors tried so many different materials for the filament until they discovered just the right material. If you're curious, it was carbonized Bristol board. That was the winner. It was not coconut or human hair, though they tried those too. Next slide, please. So each book contains a clear, simple, how it works spread. Here we show how electricity passes through the filament, causing it to heat up and glow. So kids come away from these books with an understanding of how the science and the invention actually work. Next slide, please. And so finally for Eureka, I just wanted to share a quick sneak peek at the 2 titles we have coming out next spring, Guitar and Wind Power. Perfect for young music lovers and young environmentalists out there, of which thankfully I think there are many. We'll go to the next slide. So now for something maybe not completely different, but a little different. I want to share one of our series that takes nonfiction STEM elements and couches them in a fiction story, which is really one of the hallmarks of Kane Press books. Math Matters, which debuted in 1996 and now comprises 40 easy-to-read books, is Kane Press's best-selling series with sales of 15 million books worldwide, over 1.25 million in the US alone. So I think of this as a must-have series. And, you know, how often have you heard a kid say, why do I have to learn this math thing? What's a better answer than to show a story in which a kid actually uses that math thing in a realistic situation? Our goal for Math Matters is to help kids approach math with real enthusiasm so that when they grow up, they won't be afraid of math or be one of those people who say, oh, I'm just no good at math, or has to panic every time they have to calculate a tip at a restaurant. So we really strive to make math relevant to kids' everyday lives. And as an example of that, we can go to the next slide, the Bark Park. So in this story, 2 kids raise money for a park bench so their elderly neighbor, Mr. Romero, has a place to sit at the dog run. And this book has so many hooks. Hook 1, it features a great social emotional learning lesson about kindness and neighborliness, which I think we all really need right now. Hook 2, each Math Matters book focuses on one math topic, and for the Bark Park, it's percentage. So the kids in the story use percentage and the big cardboard thermometer you can see here to mark progress toward their fundraising goal. In Hook 3, we've received really great feedback for our math books that help kids with financial literacy, also very important, and this fundraising book is a perfect fit. And Hook 4, it's got pets and cute puppies galore. So I know sometimes folks find it challenging to categorize books like this. I've seen this series listed as narrative nonfiction, and it is narrative and it contains great nonfiction math elements, but at heart, it's a fiction story that kids will relate to. So, you know, these books are my favorite kind of genre blend. Next slide, please. So here, next, Think Positive Pippa covers the key math concept of positive and negative numbers. It's set at a Renaissance fair, nerds unite, and it makes this topic ridiculously fun as Pippa finds herself on a life-size game board, and she takes forward steps using positive numbers toward Fairy Forest and backward steps using negative numbers toward the dreaded Stinky Swamp, giving kids a really easy way to grasp negative numbers on a number line. And I'll mention that all the Math Matters titles feature helpful sidebars, back matter with fun activities, also free downloadable printable website activities. I recently looked into how many pages of free downloadable content we have, and it's nearly 1,000 pages. So go to kanepress.com, knock yourself out. It's all categorized by book and topic, so you don't have to print 1,000 pages at once. And then the next series, please. Mouse Math, you can think of as sort of a Math Matters Junior. We have 20 titles in the series, with 2 more coming out this month. And like Math Matters, the books are 32 pages each, but these are read aloud books that focus on math concepts for pre-K and kindergarten. And in the Math Matters series, each book stands alone, but Mouse Math tells the story of Albert and Wanda, 2 little mice who live in the walls of a people house and have amazing adventures with their Squeak Scout troop. And all the while they're learning about numbers, shapes, sizes, and more. We've sold 3 million books worldwide and counting in this series, and it's received several awards, including a Mathical honor, and one of my favorites, the ILA-CBC Children's Choices Award, in which kids themselves voted on which books they loved. So I consider it a big win when kids actively choose and vote for a math book. So let me show an example of a story in the next slide, please. The math topic of this book, Super Zero, is the number 0, a tricky concept for kids, of course. And this is a great sports story about teamwork. And, you know, along with sneaking math into a great story, we always try to sneak in a social emotional learning lesson as well. We're very sneaky. Next slide, please. So Albert is excited about joining the squeakball team this season, and he is pumped to score lots of goals. But then he gets his uniform number, a big round 0. And during games, he's all over the field, running and passing. But guess how many goals he scores? 0. And Albert is sure his uniform is cursed until his big sister Wanda shows him that the number 0 is a secret superhero. After all, you can't get to 1 million without a few zeros. And in the end, Albert finishes the season with the most assists of any squeakball player and learns that sometimes an assist is even better than scoring a goal. So much like Math Matters, each book in Mouse Math features multiple pages of back matter activities related to reading comprehension and the book's math topic, as well as, of course, the free online activities. And next slide, please. So in addition to Super Zero coming out this month, we have The Perfect Split with the math topic of greater than, less than, and equal to. This one is a super fun story that features arcade games kids will love and a really sweet SEL lesson about generosity and sharing. And then in July, we'll release the 12-Bug Day, which makes simple the challenging math topic of subtracting from a two-digit number as Albert goes on a bug treasure hunt at the Bug Museum. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there's one other award-winning STEM series I wanted to quickly shine a spotlight on for you, the Milo and Jazz Mysteries. Here in the US, we've sold 250,000 books in this 12-book chapter book series. Booklist loved this series, whoop! Gave it a starred review and listed it as one of the 100 best children's and YA mysteries of the past 10 years. This series centers on 2 kid detectives. Well, they're detectives in training, and with mail-away detecting lessons from world-famous super sleuth Dash Marlowe, Milo and Jazz hone their detecting skills and solve all kinds of local mysteries. Of course, what we call super sleuthing skills are in fact curriculum-based problem-solving skills. So in the time-honored practice of kids don't realize they're learning, Milo and Jazz solve mysteries by finding patterns, by working backward and thinking logically and drawing conclusions. This is also a high-low series with a grade 2 reading level and an interest level of grades 1 to 5. So it's really excellent for struggling readers. And we worked so hard to make these series so intriguing and so satisfying that, not gonna lie, adults actually love them too. And these characters, I have to say, Milo's a hoot, but Jazz is probably my favorite of all Kane Press characters. She is so smart and deadpan and logical. She's definitely the brains of the operation, and I hope that young Black girls will adore her too. These books too have incredible activities with hidden pictures and mini mysteries and puzzles, and there are more activities online as well. And next slide, please. So just lastly, I wanted to share this fabulous series on literacy and language arts, particularly because we often see photographic nonfiction, but photographic fiction is a little rarer and I think an exciting creature. And Bright Owl Books is a 10-book series for ages 3 to 5 by best-selling Step Into Reading author Molly Cox. Molly is just one of those ridiculously creative people whose talent knows absolutely no bounds. And each book in this series features a single short or long vowel sound and features a funny, zippy 100 to 200 word story with really adorable characters. And Molly brings a really fresh approach to engaging beginning readers with this bright, gorgeous photographic art of felt critters that she handcrafted and posed and photographed herself, creating this beautiful, rich, friendly world for kids to enter and enjoy, all while they build, you know, reading skills and confidence. So that is a wrap for Kane Press. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I'm very excited to introduce the illustrious Carolyn Yoder, who will tell you all about Calkins Creek.
Oh, thank you, Juliana. I like that, illustrious. Anyway, Calkins Creek is excited to be highlighting many different personalities this fall, as you will come to see, spotlighting what makes each one unique, one of a kind. Next slide. So we begin with Dazzling Dolly. Dolly Parton really needs no introduction. But in this STEAM picture book by Suzanne Slade and illustrated by Ed Fotheringham, next, we see Dolly as a young girl in the Tennessee Smoky Mountains with big dreams to sing and perform. Only problem is when she gets to sing in public before an audience, she always seems to get a big case of stage fright. As Dolly grows and her talent grows, next, she lands a record deal and an appearance at the Opry. She faces her fear of being in the limelight head on. This is Dolly Parton as she's never been seen before, a person who is totally, totally relatable. What young kid or even young adult who has dreams of being a performing artist hasn't wrestled with stage fright? Next. With Dolly's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think it is going to be a done deal, and her star always rising. It's never dimming. This book should hit all the right notes. Next. So that's an introduction to Suzanne and Ed. Next. Ethel Rosenberg is virtually unknown to most everyone. If she is known, it is as a spy and traitor. This is the first YA novel in verse on her, and it paints a three-dimensional portrait. Next. Of a young girl growing up on the Lower East Side, working as a typist, but dreaming of acting and singing on stage, getting involved in workers' rights, meeting Julius Rosenberg, next, starting a family, next, getting arrested for passing secrets on, and being executed as a traitor to the country. Ethel's song is unbelievably part humorous, part romantic, part defiance, and part tragedy. And that's why on the cover, we didn't want to show Ethel as she's, go back, please. As she's seen, this is a very typical photo of her that's been reproduced many, many times. We wanted to show Ethel as somebody who is very, very determined and devout about workers' rights. So this book is, as I said, part tragedy, part defiance, part romantic, part humorous, and incredibly timely, as spies and traitors seem to always be on the front page. The death penalty is always on the front page, and social injustice on many different levels is unfortunately always front page news. Written by Barbara Krasner, an award-winning writer on Jewish themes, this novel is light and dark as it opens up one of America's most misunderstood persons. Next. Next. We all know the book, but do we really know the story behind the making of the book and its author and illustrator? Well, that will change now as Emma Bland-Smith and Becca Stanlander present in glorious detail, next, Mr. Mccleskey's marvelous Mallards, the story of the making of Make Way for Ducklings. Unbelievably, this is the first book on the subject. Next, a book that is a celebration of determination and perseverance, Robert Mccleskey went to great lengths to get the story and the art right, studying ducks, inviting ducks into his home, and even at times acting like a duck. Quack, quack. There are a lot of quacks in the book. Dedicating to presenting the best story and illustrations possible, young readers will marvel at all that went into this classic. They will even see how Robert Mccleskey relied on his editor, yes, a little plug for editors, to make sure his book was the best it could possibly be. Next. And that's the team behind Mr. Mccleskey's. Next slide, please. Who knew Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, John Burroughs, and Harvey Firestone had time to have fun? Kids may have heard of these 4 American icons, but certainly not like this. Next. In Road Trip by Claudia Friedel and brilliantly illustrated by Jeremy Holmes, readers get to see these 4 vagabonds, that's what they called themselves, traveling the country in search of fun and adventure and companionship. Who knew they took vacations? Who knew they played games? But did they really relax and do nothing? Not a chance. Edison invented string lights while camping, and Ford perhaps the first food truck. Next slide, please. But when the trips that took place all over the United States, and there is a map inside, became tedious and people started hounding them, the 4 vagabonds took their feet off the pedals, but not before starting a camping craze. Americans soon began taking road trips all their own. So they are sort of given credit for starting the RV camping craze that we all now enjoy. Next slide. So it really is a fabulous book. The illustrations are just unbelievable, and you will just spend hours looking at them. Next slide, please. So we are lucky to be talking to Gail Jarrow, the 2022 YALSA winner, about her latest book in the Medical Fiasco series, American Murderer, a bit later in the webinar. So that will be to come, that talk with Gail will be coming up. But American Murderer is the 3rd book in the Medical Fiasco series. Blood and Germs, about Civil War medicine, was the first, and Ambush, which won the YALSA, about President Garfield's assassination, was the second. Next slide. Who knew Hookworm went by this terrifying nickname, American Murderer? But Gail puts it to good use, and it sets the right tone for this medical thriller about the causes of hookworm. Those are hookworms right in the beginning, in the guy's hands right there, magnified, but that's what they look like. Next, the people who set out to find a cure and the state of the disease today. But much more to come. Stay tuned. Gail reveals all. Next. Next, please. And we will also be talking to, I'll use the same word, illustrious Beth Anderson, the author of Cloaked in Courage, about Deborah Sampson, whose life has proved a mystery for years. Next slide. Who was Deborah Sampson? Why is she a woman of mystery? Next. And why has she been a topic of conversation for hundreds and hundreds of years? Next. Beth will also tell all in just a sec. So both these books will have a lot more information to come from both authors. Next slide, please. And then the next slide. So before we get to meet Gail and Beth, I thought I'd give you a little background on both of them. But it really is going to be, or will be, my honor to talk to them. They are stellar nonfiction writers who absolutely love nonfiction and who I love working with. So you're in for a real treat. First up, Gail Jarrow. Besides the Medical Fiasco series, Gail wrote another series on deadly diseases. So There is Red Madness right there. That is about pellagra. And then we have Fatal Fever about typhoid fever, and Bubonic Panic about the bubonic plague in America. So the other book that's noted there is, or shown there, is Spooked, which was on the War of the Worlds broadcast, which won the Seibert honor. Not shown here, but Gail will be talking about it, is The Poison Eaters, an Orbis Pictus honor. And that book was about the birth of the FDA. So you can see that Gail concentrates a lot on science and history and how they come together to make, really, these books are incredibly thrilling to read. Next slide. So about Beth Anderson, she's not a series writer as of yet, but she covers a lot of ground in her books, from the award-winning Lizzie Demands a Seat, which is on the left, about Elizabeth Jennings and her fight to desegregate the New York City trolley system. And then we go to Smelly Kelly, a little bit different tone, about an ingenious inventor. Then going on the farther right to Tad Lincoln and his antics in the White House, and really his bond with his dad. It's a beautiful story. And finally to Prudence Wright, who, like Deborah Sampson, was another revolutionary heroine. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and turn on my camera and have Gail and Beth turn on their camera so we can all talk together. So we're going to have a little informal chat about the writing of some of the books that were on the screen, and also some of the challenges of writing about them. So I'm going to sort of go back and forth between the two. They asked their own questions, so it's easier. So Gail, let's talk about American Murderer, and how does that tie into the other two books, Blood and Germs and Ambushed? What do they all have in common?
First of all, hi, everybody. These books are part of my Medical Fiasco series. All these are about events in American history that were really tragedies in medicine. But out of these tragedies came advancements that have made our health better in this country. Some of them were really path-breaking and got rid of deadly diseases that people don't even know about anymore. So they're really remarkable stories. And I pick little known stories, which is kind of a hallmark, I think, of Calkins Creek. Mm-hmm. So the Medical Fiasco series starts with the Civil War. Now, most of the books I write take place between the Civil War and World War II, because that period is just an amazing one in terms of medical progress. And it involved people that are still alive today. So it's just amazing what has happened and what has changed. I start with the Civil War in Blood and Germs and talk about the kind of advancements that came in disease control and also surgery. Then 20 years after Blood and Germs is American Murderer, which is about the assassination and slow, agonizing death of President Garfield in 1881. American Murderer is 20 years after that, at the turn of the 20th century. And like Ambushed, it's a medical mystery. What is making many, many people, millions of people in the American South tired, no energy, and even killing them? And can a scientist convince the medical community of the cause of this problem and how to cure it? And then the final question is, can these people be saved? So American Murder is that story of a scientist who worked for the Department of Agriculture at the time, Charles Stiles. He was a parasite expert. An American Murderer is the name he gave to a hookworm species that had never been acknowledged or recognized in the Americas before. There was a hookworm that they knew about in Europe and Africa, but they didn't think there, I mean, the doctors at the time didn't think there were any hookworms in this country unless somebody brought it in, an immigrant, for example, from Europe. They didn't realize that there was a species of hookworm and it was running rampant in the American South. This is a story of how Stiles broke through the medical establishment, finally convinced people, and figured out a way to help these people. And it all happened as a coalition between public health authorities and private money. And the money came from John D. Rockefeller.
Mm.
It is really a big step in how public health has been handled, and we see it today too.
Yeah, you couldn't ask for a better title. I mean, sometimes we struggle with what to title a book. This one, no problem.
No, and it was made up in 1902. So
yeah, so that was great. So turning the table to Beth Anderson, as I said, you haven't written any series yet. You tend to write on a wide variety of subjects, but why Deborah? She tends to be open for debate. And so what were really your challenges writing about her?
Well, the problems are inherent in her story. And, it was a real challenge to do the research. I was attracted to her story several times and sort of pushed away because I didn't see enough to work with. And then when I learned a little bit more, I thought, maybe she's just a con artist, and I have to really like her if I'm going to write about her. But, as I started to dig into her story, I found someone who isn't that different than the rest of us. And I think that, it was really the biography and the biographer that wrote her story first while she was still alive, and that she contributed some to. But he tended to want to make her into something she wasn't. And so he borrowed from other books and he made up his own stuff and he added it to her story. And all of that has been passed on in every version of her story. And so the challenge is really picking out what's true, what's not true, what's most likely, what's possible, and then trying to go with the most verifiable pieces of her story. There remain a few things that we can't prove, and we just have to let them be that way. But I still want to tell stories of these people with incomplete historical records, because if we don't, their stories are never told, and there's so many people missing from history. But she was just an intriguing person. And when I started to find out where she came from and, her difficult childhood and the choices she had and the times, the setting is so important to understanding the character. And when you start to look at what was happening and what was tradition, and then you can start to understand why she made the choices that she did. And though we have a lot of documentation of her later years when there were military records and those pieces, we have very little from the beginning of her life. So that is really the challenge, is picking out, the verifiable or most likely parts of the story. And I was really fortunate to find one resource in which the author examined every little piece in depth and really taught me a lot about being a history detective. And that's why the back matter in her story is about being a history detective, and all the little, potholes along the way, like spelling wasn't standard. So you have to look up different kinds of ways to spell her name if you want to find out about her. So, lots of the things that you deal with as you dig into history and trying to understand the person that she was.
I think that's fascinating, like the back matter, showing kids how to sort of come to a subject and, what's the challenge, what do you rely on? Who are the people you talk to, people who've spent their lives studying Deborah Sampson. And so in a way, the back matter of the book is sort of relaying how you found her story and what you did with it. And I think kids, have to find themselves doing reports and, figuring out things on their own, like what to leave in and what to leave out of their stories. I think it was valuable, the back matter. So going back to Gail and revisiting Dr. Stiles, who comes up in a few of your books, and you've written on the same time frame, the first 2 decades of the 20th century. So how does, I guess you did that in Deadly Diseases and you did it in Poison Eaters, which I'll remind people is about the birth of the FDA. So how does he connect? So how does your research sometimes connect, and you can sort of get, for lack of a better word, more bang for your buck when you're writing books?
So Charles Stiles isn't actually in any of those other books, but when I did the research for those books, I kept coming across his name because he was working with some of the people I was focused on. Now, Stiles was trained in Germany, and at the time, the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, that's where science happened. That's where the best scientists were. So he was trained in Germany to be a parasitologist and hired by the Department of Agriculture because parasites are a problem for farm animals. And while he was there, he was working alongside, not actually with, but they were both together there and knew each other well, was Harvey Wiley. And Harvey Wiley is in the Poison Eaters. He was a chemist at the Department of Agriculture who was convinced and showed that there were dangerous chemicals in food and drugs. And because he kept going with this and never stopped pushing this concern, we now have the Food and Drug Administration. So these two guys were connected at that time. Now, when Stiles became more interested in human hookworm, he left the Department of Agriculture where he was working on animal parasites, and he went to the Public Health Service. And that was, he became the head of the zoology division, which studied animals that cause diseases in people. And when he was working there, his boss was the Surgeon General, Walter Wyman. Wyman came into several other books that I wrote. He was the Surgeon General who oversaw the approach to dealing with plague. The first time plague came to the United States in 1900 in San Francisco. And that book is Bubonic Panic. Wyman was also the Surgeon General who appointed Joseph Goldberger to investigate pellagra. That's red madness. And Goldberger was successful at finding the cause. It's a dietary deficiency, after many people had tried and nobody had succeeded. And then finally, there's a connection of Stiles to fatal fever. Fatal fever is about typhoid fever. And that disease was really rampant at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. It was like in the top 5 deadly infectious diseases in the United States. And the Public Health Service was really involved in trying to bring it under control. It spread through human waste. And that's exactly how hookworm spreads. So Stiles and a couple other scientists at the Public Health Service decided to try to design a better outhouse for rural areas that didn't have any kind of sewage treatment or pipes or anything like that. They had to rely on their own property. And that is one way, they came up with something. So those 3 guys did have some success. So I see Stiles connecting to all of these people who I consider public health heroes, because what they did, what they discovered really improved health in the United States.
And they faced all kind of challenges, people doubting them, people fighting them, and they persevered, and thank the Lord, that they did.
Yes, that's the thing, that they were sure enough of themselves. They felt they had the proof and that they were correct, and they did not allow criticism or scorn or anything else to stop them from keeping on with their message.
Right. But it is interesting how your books tend to, you've written one and it helps you write the next one, and it helps you write the next one. And I think a lot of really stellar nonfiction writers realize connections in history. I think it's extremely important. So, and also in recording history, Beth, you asked this question about that you're concerned less about reporting history, but you're more interested in sort of the motivations of your main character. And so how do you really choose your subjects? I'm sort of combining two of your questions, but you go from Prudence to Tad to Lizzie. What is it about these people you've highlighted that you're drawn to?
Well, I like obscure people too. So
They need to be known. They need to be known.
They do. And they're like the rest of us, we're not the mainstream necessarily that has sort of created that history that we all learned about in school, that's names and dates and places. What I find interesting about history is the humanity of each person, and that they are not that different than we are. There is just one moment maybe in time where they met a challenge and made a decision, and they affected others around them. And one thing I share with kids when I talk to them is, yes, we've been living with this pandemic, for 2 years now, and this is history. We are living in the midst of history. This will be in history books, and it changes how we view the world, and it changes our actions. It changes how we see things and how we understand. And so one thing I want kids to understand is that they are part of history, all of us. But basically, I choose people who see possibility. I think that's probably the common denominator in my book. They see past what is to what might be. And whether it's circumstances that kind of force them or their own, free and independent choices that they're looking to make, they do make a difference. And, they teach us that we all have that potential. And one of the things that I like to say is that, heroes are those people that come along and we all learn about them and we all think they paved the way for us. But really, heroes can't do it alone. They need all of us to participate and support the change. And so history is not one person, it's everybody. And I think one of the things with Deborah Sampson, she just wanted to be her. And she was kind of forced through her difficult childhood and her life as an indentured servant till she was 18. And I think all that time inside of her was brewing this perseverance to just make her own choices and be what she wanted to be and let her voice be heard. And that is something that we can all identify with.
And all of those characters, Tad and Prudence and Lizzie, and even Smelly Kelly, are sort of like Dr. Stiles. They were courageous. They sort of went forth. They didn't really care. They were just determined to do what they felt was right, which is a really great lesson to sort of not teach kids, but have to share with them that they can really make a difference by being, dedicated to a cause that they believe in. So there are similarities between American Murder or Poison Eaters and Tad Lincoln and Prudence Wright. I want to sort of maybe end the talk with with history books being relevant today, I mean, I think a lot of people think of history as old and dusty and, you know, something so far back, like, well, what's the point? Why do you teach it? Or is it just fact-based? But in American Murder, you know, the subject is so relevant today. And so maybe you can talk about that, Gail, a bit, and also why you really write history. You know, what is it about it that you are drawn to?
You know, I like to focus on medical history because it shows how far we've come. And it shows that in the past, there were really horrible diseases and a lot of suffering. And we're past that now with those particular diseases because there were advancements. And I think that that's a way to give young readers some hope, especially now. You know, we're going through something now that, you know, it's not gone, and young people had their lives disrupted. So this shows, these books and this history shows that things can change. American Murderer is also about a partnership, and probably the first partnership in this country between public health authorities and private business. That's exactly what has gotten us to the point we are now, tackling COVID. It's a combination of public health people and the private businesses that have developed vaccines and therapeutics. And the other relevant part that relates to today is Hookworm itself. This is not some problem, some parasite that doesn't still exist. It does. It's a minor problem in this country. You will occasionally read about cases. I know recently there was some press about Alabama, rural areas where sanitation isn't good. There are cases, but the real problem is that there is somewhere between 500 million and 1 billion with a B people in the world with hookworm, and it affects them. It makes them sick. It can kill them. And tragically, it hurts children the most because it retards their growth physically and intellectually. So it's an issue. It's a health concern that still exists, and it can be cured. It can be dealt with, but it's not so easy.
And could you elaborate a little bit more about why you, you know, a lot of your books are on science and history, you know, why the combination, you know, why, you know, write about deadly diseases? You seem like a calm gal, you know, or medical fiascos, you know. Well, you know, you don't fit the stereotype of somebody writing about these diseases.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't mean it like that, but I mean, you're hopeful about it. I'm just saying, what draws you to these are, you know, very, very difficult subjects, and you have to know your science.
Well, I was a zoology major, and I taught science for a few years to kids. So that draws me to it. But, you know, the history of medicine has always just been something I have been interested in. I just like it. And one thing I have to say is those of us that write really have to be interested in the subject matter, because it takes a long time to do all that research and then writing and editing and the whole bit. So it's because of personal background in biology and medical topics, but also personal interest.
Yeah, and also, you know, when you first started, you know, the first one I believe was Red Madness, and I was like, pellagra. And through the years, you know, through all your books, I have become interested in medical history as well. And so you know, the difficult aspects of it, I mean, there's a lot of hope in these books, which is great, but it's just fascinating. I mean, they all read like medical thrillers. So, you know, anyway.
The other thing is, from teaching the age group for which I'm writing, I know that kids really like gross stuff.
They do.
And by writing these books, I'm able to talk about some of those things that are gross, but fascinating.
Right. I think that's a better word, fascinating. They are, they really are, especially that handful of hookworms, that will definitely hook
Oh,
the
but
reader.
I have to correct you,
Oh,
Carolyn.
sorry.
They
Oops.
were really roundworms.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well,
The
they were still
hookworms-
worms.
The hookworms are microscopic but that's a great picture, but it's not,
Okay, but the cover is a hookworm.
the cover is a hookworm. Yes, blown
Okay.
up.
But roundworms are also found, they can be found inside.
Yes, they can. And they're a problem along with hookworms all over the world. That's why that picture's in the book.
Okay, my apologies.
Sorry to correct you, but I don't want people
That's
to. be
okay.
misled.
That's fine. I just, whoops. That's why you're the expert and I'm just the editor. Anyway, so turning to Beth. Again, what do you hope kids get from your books or take away from them? And how do you feel your books are relevant to today? I mean, and how do they relate to kids reading today?
Well, I think that understanding that you're part of history, but I think that history, when we understand the past, it helps us see today and understand today in new light. And I think on a personal level, when kids see what makes a person from history act the way they act, what motivates them, how do they make those decisions and meet those challenges, then they also see that in their own world around them. As they're meeting the challenges and making those decisions, they have models and they sort of vicariously can practice hard things and their world opens up. I think that we all have very limited experiences in our lives, but by opening up the world a little bit, we can see things more widely and increase our understanding. And just,
well, they all are. I mean, Prudence Wright and Deborah Sampson and Lizzie were all activists. I mean, dealing with the problem and being upset about it and fighting for it. And I think kids today can relate to that.
they can, and they can see there are things you can do that are not violent. There are ways that you can protest, ways you can make change. And so it just helps, that toolbox fill for kids about how to deal with the world, I think.
Yeah. Well, we are about at the end, but I want to thank you both. It's been a joy to work with you both on all these books, and we have more books coming out in the future. So I'm excited about that our relationships will not be ending, and readers will be meeting more fascinating characters and aspects of history. So thank you both again, Gail Jarrow and Beth Anderson. And thank you all out there in the webinar world.
Thanks so much to all of you. It was so wonderful to hear about all these great titles. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, Edelweiss catalog, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones, like those you see here. Not yet a subscriber? Pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of the special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Patron-friendly, librarian-approved, and free with a Booklist subscription, Booklist Reader, Booklist's new digital-only magazine highlighting diverse readers' advisory recommendations for all ages, has arrived. To see and share the latest issue, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. And recently, Booklist, Booklinks, and Booklist Reader joined the Overdrive Magazine's program in partnership with Zinio, and are available for your patrons to read in Libby. Catch up on the latest issues now. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsor, Astra Books for Young Readers. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.